from the Victory Studios in downtown Little Rock, this is Capitol View with your host, Jesse Tenor.
Good Sunday morning to you and welcome into Capitol View. I'm Jesse Tenor. It took 914 days between Election Day 2016 and the first legal medical marijuana in Arkansas. But now the state's first two dispensaries are up and running and more are on the way. Later this half hour, I'll break down the first few days of cannabis sales and the bumps in the road that have popped up so far. We begin with the news that's affecting farmers and consumers across Arkansas and the United States. It's been just more than a week since the Trump administration announced $200 billion of new tariffs on Chinese goods. That move came as negotiations broke down on a deal between the two nations. China responded quickly, as expected. On Monday, the Chinese government announced $60 billion of tariffs on imports from the U.S. President Trump doubling down on his strategy this week.
We're having a little squabble with China because we've been treated very unfairly for many, many decades, for actually a long time. And it should have been handled a long time ago, and it wasn't, and we'll handle it now. I think it's going to turn out extremely well.
The president and members of Congress who support the tariffs say farmers understand his position and are willing to wait it out. The Department of Agriculture says it could make up to $20 billion available to farmers in a second round of assistance designed to offset their losses from this round of Chinese tariffs. But many whose livelihood is most affected by this trade war are left wondering when it will end.
A few years ago, I was selling soybeans at $16.80 a bushel. Soybeans have dropped just below $8 a bushel. The President of the United States owes farmers like myself some type of plan of action.
We are accustomed to a lot of this, but the trade issues now really got a lot of farmers discouraged. We're in a global economy that we need to eliminate the tariffs to get equal access to the world markets.
And with the Democratic presidential primary campaign in full swing and Iowa is the first state to vote, it's no surprise the trade is now one of the top talkers on the trail.
You can't get much done on trade relative to China by engaging in a trade war that only hurts working people and farmers. What you have to do is you need the whole world, and the folks who agree with us are getting beat up by China, working together. But he's alienated most of our allies.
Consumers are also bracing for the impact of these tariffs. New surveys show the trade war could cost the average American family of four almost $800 a year. And late last week, Walmart announced it's getting ready to raise prices on items impacted by tariffs on Chinese goods. The Arkansas-based retailer imports about a quarter of its goods from China. Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton is among Republicans in Congress who supports President Trump's trade war strategy. He addressed the sacrifice many Americans are making in an interview last Monday on CBS This Morning and made this comment that raised some eyebrows.
There will be some sacrifice on the part of Americans, I grant you that. But I also would say that sacrifice is pretty minimal compared to the sacrifices that our soldiers make overseas, that our fallen heroes who are laid to rest in Arlington make, that are right about in sacred duty.
You can't compare those two sacrifices.
That's right.
Cotton's Democratic challenger, Josh Mahoney, kind of saying the same thing. He seized on that remark, saying on Twitter this week, "This is disgusting. My opponent, Tom Cotton, shouldn't use the sacrifices of our troops to cover up for a disastrous trade war. Arkansas families are hurting because of this, and all Cotton is offering is offensive BS like this." I also asked the moderator of Meet the Press, Chuck Todd, to weigh in on Cotton's remarks and how tricky this issue could be as we get into the 2020 campaign.
Well, look, I think Senator Cotton is trying to figure out a way to sell something that he isn't comfortable selling. And so instead of talking about the merits of the policy, he was attempting to say, look, it's not good currently for a lot of farmers. It's not good currently for a lot of folks that export materials outside the United States, but he was trying to say, hey, make a sacrifice now, it'll get better later. It is a bit of the message that the president is trying to sell going forward. But I'll tell you, I think it's a really tough message to sell because as a small government conservative, is Tom Cotton and other Republicans going to be comfortable essentially subsidizing those farmers, which is what the president is saying he would be willing to do, subsidizing them essentially with a government handout to make up the difference in this. And I think that I understand what Tom Cotton's trying to do. He's trying to sell something, a policy that he personally may not be comfortable with, and politically he needs to be on the president's side, and that's what he's doing. But I think you see the challenge that some Republicans have in dealing with this tariff war.
And for more on the discussion here in Arkansas, I'm joined this morning by Democratic Party Chair Michael John Gray and former Republican State Representative John Burris. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you.
So first off, let's start with Cotton's comments. Giving it some context, that CBS interview started off with a military focus. Cotton was promoting his new book, and he's also a combat veteran who was raised on a cattle farm. Michael John, I want to start with you. Speak to this not only as a Democrat, but as an Arkansan who makes his living off of farming. Cotton said farmers are willing to bear some sacrifices in the short term that hopefully in the long term will ensure the country's prosperity and security. Is that how you feel, and is that the sense that you get from farmers?
So let's be real clear. The other thing Senator Cotton said was that the sacrifices the farmers make is minimal in comparison to the sacrifices that our men and women in the military make. Every sacrifice is minimal compared to being willing to lay down your life. So I thought that was a little bit of a cheap shot by the senator to try to shift the issue into comparing it to the service of the veterans that we all respect. But no, the farmers endure short-term sacrifice all the time. I think there's this perception of farmers driving big Cadillacs and living the life, but for most Arkansas farmers, it's mortgaging everything you have to maybe at the end of the year net $50,000, $60,000, but literally everything your family has, your house, your wife's car, everything down to except your kids' clothes is on the line if you don't make that crop. They make sacrifices every day. The long term, obviously China, there's an imbalance in trade. Obviously China and other countries in the world have been bad actors, and we've been fighting that for years. So I think we could all agree that the long-term goal of evening this out would be great, but when you're direct harm on an industry that is already at its low, that's already suffering other issues, to pile this on top of it, and it being Arkansas's #1 industry, our leaders in Washington need to stand up and go, look, this is the bread and butter of our state. We're going to have to break free on that and fight. And I don't see any of them doing it. Not the, and each one of our congressmen represent an agriculture area. Obviously, our senators do. And yeah, they sacrifice every day. They're not. That is not the sentiment of the Arkansas farmer right now.
And then, John, respond to this not only as a Republican, but also a Cotton supporter, someone who's worked with him really since day one of his, tour in Washington. Mm-hmm. And then also as someone who knows a lot of people who do make their living off farming. His point, trade war, less costly than actual war. The China situation, not great. But are you concerned that it could escalate to that? Is that a fair comparison?
I think so. In regards to the comment, I do think there was context, and the context was talking about his book that he wrote about Arlington Cemetery and the sacrifices soldiers make. That led into this point about the question about trade. And the point I know he was trying to make, and I think did make, was that yes, the tariffs are burdensome and they're very hurtful to the agriculture community. The question is, are they worth it? Is it a worthy sacrifice to balance out the trade, prevent China from growing into a stronger competitor, both economically and militarily, and that an economic war, while painful, is certainly less painful than a military conflict. I think he believes that. I think there are a lot of points to support that side of the argument. That doesn't make it any easier if you're the farmer on the front line right now, paying the price economically for the strategy of balancing out trade. But long term, I think he believes it's worth it if we can level the playing field.
And recently the CDC reported that suicide rates are up for rural farmers due to lack of just mental health care access. Michael John, these are people who have had farms in their families for generations, and it's not like we're going through a Great Depression, even the recession of a decade ago. So why are farmers in such a dire state now?
We are in a you won't use the word depression, that's a little bit dramatic, but we're in a huge trough in agriculture right now, and we have my grandfather in 1970 was getting better prices for the crops than the farmers in my area are right now, and we all know that things cost a lot more than they did in 1970. But I would argue that child who's seeing their father having to start a new career at 50, or that wife or husband that's seeing their spouse check the insurance policy because the crop loan didn't come in this year, this isn't short-term sacrifice. This is the end of a career, the end of lives, the end of a lifestyle, the end of a family legacy. This is not some, you've got to eat chicken instead of steak this week. This is the end of some of these people's figurative and in some cases, unfortunately, literal lives. And for us to add to it, the president can't affect the weather. He can't affect the the oversupply, or the natural disasters. But to add to what we're already dealing with, yeah, this is not a short-term sacrifice. This is the end for a lot of people.
How would you respond to that, John?
Well, it's tough to be a farmer. I really do believe that. I grew up in north central Arkansas. It's a lot of poultry cattle, not row crop. That's a tough living too, and tough people do it. Again, I think especially in terms of China and a lot of the problems that exist with the market in general, it's been a long time coming, and imbalance is real. The way that they meddle in tech and patents and all these things are real. You can Google and read one of a dozen stories about the way that they are trying to become an economic and military competitor to the U.S., even more so. And tariffs are hard. I don't necessarily agree with the ideology behind them.
They're a tax, right, John?
They are tax,
okay.
And the consumer pays it. I hope it's temporary, and I hope the outcome yields a more fair system. It's not permanent. I hope that the outcome yields a better system.
So, I mean, yeah, Trump is correctly touting that the economy is doing well by traditional measures, but his administration is even admitting that these tariffs are going to hurt people, and they've turned from a bargaining chip to something that could really stick. So why is that? Why should, why has this been changing?
Well, look,
is that fair?
Yeah, well, it is, and for those that know me, which I'm not really a passionate defender of the president
right.
in any stretch of the word. He changes his story a lot. Probably whatever he wakes up thinking sometimes. That doesn't mean that overall the imbalance is real in trade and otherwise with China. I think folks on all sides admit it. They admitted it before the tariffs, and most agree that something needed to be done. Just because it happens to be this president doing it through somewhat inconsistent rhetoric doesn't mean that it's not the right approach.
How would you respond to that?
Well, I would say let's remember that China, while this may be a punishment or trying to get China to equal out, American consumers are paying the price for these tariffs too, and higher prices and goods that are having to be sourced from other places, or American industries that are doing better but kind of have now a little bit of a monopoly on the market. So this price is getting passed down to the end user. So let's not forget that. But at the end of the day, agriculture is not just about those farmers. And every small town in Arkansas, frankly, every town in Arkansas is a small town. We can drive 10 minutes from anywhere in Arkansas and be in a cow pasture or soybean field. So farming's affecting it all. It's not just the farmers. It's the grocery stores they shop at. It's the parts stores they buy things. It's the car dealers they buy vehicles from. It's the tractor parts stores they buy parts from. This has ripples. And if any economic downturn we've seen in the United States and in our history, agriculture's downturn has started. Has been the precipitator to everything else that happened. So, especially in Arkansas, it's our #1 industry. You got to have somebody standing up and saying, there's got to be a better way to do this.
Customers pay the price for inaction too. I'm sorry, but I would just add that. I mean, they're paying the price of the tariffs, but inaction and lack of confrontation to China to try to balance the system costs customers too, just in different ways. And that's why this debate is more complex than sometimes people act, and that's not unique to this issue. But I hope that the tariffs are successful at balancing the field, and we can move on and help farmers.
On that note, Arkansas-based Walmart announced this week that it's raising prices due to the tariffs. And then you kind of touched on this a little bit, but I wanted to see what you guys thought of this analysis. So Trump, of course, championed one of the largest tax cuts in recent years. And now enacting these tariffs would be equivalent to one of the largest tax increases in decades.
I hope the tariffs aren't permanent, because you're right. I like more money in the pockets of Arkansans, and I hope that they're able to get rid of the tariffs soon.
Tariffs are definitely a tax increase, and let's hope they're not permanent, but for some of these people, for some of these farmers, for some of these retailers and farm communities, they last a year, it might as well have been permanent because it's going to put them out of business.
And we'll come back to our panel a little later, but coming up next, medical marijuana is now for sale in Arkansas. As 2 dispensaries shoulder the load for the entire state, we'll look at how things are going in the first few days and when we might see more open up shop. You're watching Capitol View on Sunday morning.
Sold it. 2 court-ordered real estate auctions in Fox, Arkansas, Tuesday, June 4th at 10 a.m. First, a 34-acre farm with a 2,000-square-foot house. Second, a 1-acre level building site. Go to wilsonauctioneers.com.
Sold it. Success Vision has incredible prices.
I got 2 pairs of glasses in about an hour for only $39.
I got my eye exam next door.
Success Vision has over 1,000 frames to choose from.
It's a one-stop shop for buying glasses.
12 years, and the service keeps getting better. It's a 10 out of 10.
This is my 5th year with Success Vision, and I'm happier than ever.
You better for $39 in an hour for less. Come see us today, Success Vision Express.
Ever since I was 5 years old, it's been all about football. It's been about running, jumping, blocking, tackling. I have terrible foot issues that prevented me from really having a normal life with my kids. With the good feet, our supports, man, I'm always ready. My kids actually got to enjoy me in the yard more, racing each other, backpedaling, teaching them some things, being a dad.
Try them for yourself with a free arch support fitting and test walk at the Good Feet store.
Ready for summer? Nissan is. You can't miss out during the Summer of SUVs sales event. All you need is a great camera, the right tunes, and a change of scenery. Save on it all at Nissan's Summer of SUV sales event. Save up to $4,500 on the 2019 Murano, or save up to $5,500 on the 2019 Armada.
Eating right and improving your health is always easier when you have a little help. For everyday tips to make sure you're living well, go to KARK.com and click on the Keep On Amazing tab. Brought to you by Baptist Health. Keep on amazing. You're watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
Welcome back to Capitol View. We are now in the second weekend of medical marijuana sales in the natural state. For several days, hundreds of people have been lining up outside the state's first 2 dispensaries, both in Hot Springs. People from every corner of the state tell me they traveled to the Spa City to purchase the medicine they've been waiting for years. Another day, another long line.
It's kind of festive atmosphere. It's fun.
But the spirits were high.
We just made a little outing out of it.
Kelly Helms drove about 3 hours from Fayetteville to Green Springs Medical in Hot Springs to treat her neuropathy, a side effect of being cancer-free.
They were able to get most of it by surgery, but the chemotherapy that I had damaged all my nerves.
After years of waiting,
voila.
3 hours was nothing.
Relief. You know, maybe not as much as later, but relief.
Helms paid about $220 for half an ounce, the max the dispensary would sell per patient, with about $30 going to the state.
It's a little high.
Others drove across town to doctor's orders to fill the max set by the state, 2.5 ounces every 2 weeks, which costs more than $1,000.
The price is very high now, and I think it'll balance out as more of the cultivators come on board.
Baron Crane also anticipates more forms of the product to become available soon. But for now,
probably smoke it.
While others will make their own.
I'm a baker by trade, so I have a lot of recipes I'm anxious to try out.
Patients have bought more than 35 pounds of medical marijuana since sales began. Arkansas officials only expect that number to grow when a new product hits shelves next week. The state's lone cultivator, Bold Team, plans to stock the 2 open dispensaries in Hot Springs with edibles. The spokesperson for the medical marijuana program says patients won't see products like brownies, cookies, or candy at Doctor's Orders RX in Green Springs Medical because state law prohibits it. But there is some room for creativity.
While you can't have a gummy bear, you could have a gummy that looks like a vitamin that you would pull off the shelf at any local pharmacy.
Hardin says 2 other cultivators will soon join Bold Team in harvesting the product, while dispensaries in Little Rock, as well as Northwest and Northeast Arkansas, should open within the next month. Not everyone's thrilled with the start of medical marijuana sales in Hot Springs. A pharmacy chain in Jefferson County called Doctor's Orders has been flooded with calls and Facebook posts about a product it doesn't sell. The pharmacy's owners want that confusion to end and says they could take legal action. A Jefferson County pharmacy chain
Dr. Rose Pharmacy here speaking. How can I help?
weeds out consistent customers from confused callers.
We've probably had 50 or so calls since Friday.
That's when the state's first medical marijuana dispensary, Doctor's Orders RX, made its first sale. Some of its patients confused the Hot Springs business with ones an hour away in Pine Bluff and Whitehall, Doctor's Orders Pharmacy, which sold its first prescription in 2009.
The confusion is absolutely there because of the similarity of the names and the logos. Even the colors are the same.
Owner Leland Stice spent the weekend replying to Facebook reviews, messages, and check-ins meant for the dispensary.
We've asked the people to take those posts down, but they have not responded yet. We can't remove a check-in.
Stice and his attorney sent a cease and desist letter to the dispensary Monday, asking the owners to change its name. A spokesperson for Doctor's Orders RX did not have a comment at this time. If Stice doesn't hear from the dispensary, he plans to file an official cease and desist order against it.
We don't need that kind of confusion.
Both the pharmacies and the dispensary are registered with the Arkansas Secretary of State's office and listed in good standing. Meanwhile, it's been 3.5 weeks since Sine Die at the state capitol, but legislative sessions in other states are rolling along, and for many, that means new sweeping restrictions on abortion. Among them, Georgia's new heartbeat law could ban abortion as early as 6 weeks into a pregnancy. Missouri's legislature passed an 8-week ban on Friday, and Alabama's governor signed a bill Thursday banning essentially all abortion in that state, with no exceptions for rape or incest. All of these laws are expected to lose legal challenges in lower courts, but many states admit their goal is to get the U.S. Supreme Court to take up their case and ultimately be the first to strike down the 1973 Roe v. Wade decision. They surpassed the handful of laws passed in Arkansas this year, which include an 18-week ban, a ban on post-viability abortion because of a Down syndrome diagnosis, and a so-called trigger law that would ban all abortion if Roe is struck down. The ACLU has said it is working on legal challenges to several of Arkansas's new laws. And when we come back, we'll look at the shakeup in the House Democratic Caucus and discuss who might be in line to become the new House Minority Leader. You're watching Capitol View on Sunday morning.
Hunting season is here, and Worldwide Weapons has you covered. From archery to hunting and tactical rifles, shotguns, handguns, gear, and accessories. Come see us today for the best selection of Weatherby in the state, along with a huge inventory of knives to choose from. Only at Worldwide Weapons.
If you need to sell your house right now, call the number on the screen. We can have a cash offer in your hands within 72 hours. We buy as is, and we'll even pay your closing costs.
Stop stressing, start dialing. Call Upward House Buyers today.
Dale's little girl's heading to college. Luckily, her dorm is about 10 minutes from a Hotel by Wyndham. Ashley's meeting all her in-laws, and she's about 10 minutes from a Hotel by Wyndham. Jeff's flying to, never mind. But hey, 10 minutes from a Wyndham. He's having the best day ever. And he's about 10 minutes from a Hotel by Wyndham. With over 6,000 hotels across the country, a great Hotel by Wyndham is closer than you think. Book direct at wyndhamhotels.com.
Life doesn't give you many second chances. But a Subaru can.
You guys okay?
Eyesight with pre-collision braking. Standard on the Subaru Ascent. Presenting the all-new 3-row Subaru Ascent. Love is now bigger than ever.
Maintain the love of your new Subaru with 2 years of complimentary maintenance.
Sold it. Attention Hot Springs business owners, developers, and investors. Absolute commercial real estate auction, Thursday, June 6th at 10 a.m. at 1239 Central Avenue in Hot Springs. The 27,000 square foot commercial building on 2.7 acres, Zone C4, 1 mile from downtown Hot Springs and Oaklawn Racing Casino Resort. With a daily traffic count of 21,000 vehicles per day, real estate will be offered in tracks and combinations. Also selling an antique car collection, and everything is selling regardless of price. Go to wilsonauctioneers.com. Sold it.
You can't be an outlaw without breaking a few rules. And the new class of Bad Boy Mowers Outlaws shatters every rule for power, performance, cut, and comfort in your bad boy country.
Bad Boy. Mow with an attitude.
Hunting season is here, and Worldwide Weapons has you covered. From archery to hunting and tactical rifles, shotguns, handguns, gear, and accessories. Come see us today for the best selection of Weatherby in the state, along with a huge inventory of knives to choose from. Only at Worldwide Weapons.
You're watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
Welcome back to Capitol View. A top Democrat in the Arkansas legislature is resigning his seat. State Representative Charles Blake announced Thursday he's stepping down, and Friday was named Little Rock Mayor Frank Scott Jr.'s chief of staff. Blake was Mayor Scott Jr.'s campaign manager and also part of Scott's mayoral transition team. He served the 36th district since 2015 and served as the House Minority Leader in this year's General Assembly. And I want to bring in John Burris and Michael John Gray back into the conversation. Michael John, wanted to ask you, who's in as Minority Leader? Who's it going to be? What's the process looking like?
There are a crop of young first-term legislators that came in. John was a Minority Leader. I was a Minority Leader. The energy is usually with the people that just came into the legislature that are willing to put that extra effort in. We had the Democrats had an amazing class of freshman legislators this time that really did the work. And I think you'll see somebody emerge from that group. I'm not ready to put a name on it yet, though.
Should a Republican even worry about challenging that seat?
And for the special election, I would think not. How about the right answer would be voters deserve a choice. I don't know if the Republican will be successful. Though.
We have had over this past week people that are running for that. There will be a spirited primary in that.
Yeah, excited to see how that plays out too.
Charles did a good job, and I hope he does well in his next role.
Charles is a personal friend. I'm excited to see what he's got to go next, but they did a great job this session.
Yeah, he's been a great friend of the show too, so we always appreciate that. And then, John, you know, there's no new shakeups in the Republican Party, so I at least wanted to make sure you got kind of a fun question at the end too, and you can weigh on this, Michael John. But who wins Game of Thrones in the series finale tonight?
Oh, wow. Yeah, does anyone win? Right.
I know. Does anyone actually win?
Yeah, no, I don't know. Dark horse, Sansa.
Sansa.
Yeah.
And Michael John, do you even watch?
I'm gonna let John weigh in on Game of Thrones. I hadn't caught up on that one.
You're too busy farming.
We're probably like the only
too busy
show that
trying to make up for the tariffs right now. I don't
right. Yeah. Keeping things serious.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks guys for being on the show again. Always appreciate it.
Perfect.
Thank you, Jessica.
And stay with us. We're back to wrap it all up after this. You're watching Capitol View on Sunday morning.
New ice cream cookie sandwiches from Sonic. Delicious cookies and real ice cream are on a summer reunion tour. They taste so good live. Hurry in for Sonic Nights. New $1.49 ice cream cookie sandwiches and half-price shakes after 8.
Have you ever wanted a brand new camper? Hi, I'm Misty Gibson for John Gibson Auto Sales, and we are an official Gulfstream camper dealer. Whether you have good credit, bad credit, or no credit, we will finance your brand new Gulfstream camper. We also have a large selection of used campers, cars, trucks, SUVs, motorcycles, ATVs, performance trailers, and boats. Check us out online at johngibsonautosales.com, and we will have your purchase ready when you get here.
Man, these Red Bull slushes are invigorating, right?
I know it, man. I'm feeling confident, feeling pumped. I want to jump this thing.
I don't know if that's such a good idea, TJ.
No, man, I need help. Can we jump this thing?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Rush in for Sonic's new Red Bull slushes, half price during happy hour.
You're watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
That does it for today's show. Don't forget, you can now take Capitol View on the go. Download the Capitol View podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And we're back with an all-new Capitol View next week. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.